Copywriting psychology. I will be teaching based off of some of the institutional education I had from my higher education in communications, along with some classical, ever working ideals in copywriting. My name is Zinzo, and welcome to my channel. Clarity beats creativity, the professional standard for high velocity sales. So you see, in the modern marketplace, where the average professional is bombarded with thousands of marketing messages and hundreds of sales emails every day, the competition for attention is fierce. To cut through the noise, many sales organizations fall into the trap of over prioritizing creativity. They seek out the wittiest subject lines, the most avant garde branding, and the most complex metaphorical storytelling. I mean, this is obvious. They want someone that will stand out, or copy rather, that will stand out, that'll be more striking to the viewers, that'll elicit more feeling from the target audience or the demographic rather. However, data and psychology consistently reveal a different truth, that clarity beats creativity every single time. I think this is crucial. It's very difficult to go with something that you don't fully understand, or to make a purchase when you're still somewhat in the dark about what exactly it is that you're purchasing. In a professional sales context, creativity is a luxury, but clarity is a necessity. While creativity might earn a smile or a brief moment of curiosity, clarity is what earns the signature. This report explores why clear communication is the ultimate competitive advantage and how to implement it as a professional standard. So you see the psychology of a buyer. Just as I said, a confused mind never actually buys. There should be a clear indication of what is being sold, what is the benefit, a clear CTA, a clear understanding of the demographic. The fundamental reason clarity wins is rooted in human psychology. The human brain is an energy saving organ. When it encounters information that is difficult to process, such as abstract metaphors, dense jargon, or clever wordplay, it consumes significant glucose to decode the information. It takes a whole lot more. You have to first get through understanding the basic text and then process what it means and reading between the lines. And that leaves room for misinterpretation as well, where your whole marketing could be misunderstood for something else. And that just takes away from the buyer wanting to purchase, even if they might have initially been interested. In a sales environment, if a prospect has to exert mental effort just to figure out what you are selling, their brain perceives that effort as a cost. If the perceived cost of understanding the message exceeds the perceived immediate value, the prospect will disengage. This is known as cognitive friction. This holds true even for cognitive distortion or cognitive dissonance, where someone knows that they should do something, but based on the amount of effort it would be, they'd rather not do it. Like how people litter. A lot of people litter. And the reason why they do so is because while I can go and find a trash can and easily do away with this and recycle and, make the earth, the world a better place to whatever extent, I would rather just toss it here because it's not worth the energy. So when you lose people in that sense, you lose a whole lot more sales from people who might actually have needed your product, all simply because it was wrapped up in too flashy a gift wrap. When you prioritize being clever over being clear, you inadvertently create friction. A prospect who is confused about how your product works or exactly what problem it solves will never feel confident enough to move forward. In sales, uncertainty is the ultimate deal killer. Clarity, on the other hand, provides the path of least resistance, allowing the prospect to move from interest to intent without mental exhaustion. I mean, this is true for anything. Anybody who's ever applied for anything at all, you know that the longer the application process, the more daunting it is to actually go about the process. And it has nothing to do with the process. You could be all for it. It's just when you have forms to fill, when you have so much that you have to do just to get in through the door, it makes wanting to even get in through the door like not so worth it anymore because you recognize that you'd rather stay with the problem, as mentioned in the previous video, where the barrier for entry for whatever it is that you're selling has to be present, as opposed to making that difficult and making anyone who wants to work with you that much less inclined to do so. The credibility gap. Why jargon is a sales liability. And I see this time and time and time again, where people use heavy jargon in order to try and encapsulate an audience because the audience isn't interested in how much you know. Audience is interested in what you can provide and how clear you can be with that. So you see many sales professionals use complex language and industry buzzwords under the guise of professional creativity. They believe that using high level terminology makes them sound more authoritative and sophisticated. In reality, the opposite is often true. I mean, if I go to a doctor and he tells me about organs I didn't know I had, I will not be so impressed. I just want to know, can you do the surgery? And what is your success rate? And then you have me, you know? So the social identity theory suggests that we trust those who communicate effectively and transparently. When a salesperson uses excessive jargon like synergetic paradigms, disruptive ecosystems, or holistic optimization, they often create a barrier between themselves and the prospect. Because now you're drawing the line of a professional to someone who's probably a novice in your field. And to bridge that gap, it's much more difficult because then there is a lack of relatability when if you were to just relate with them as a person to another person saying, hey, you have this problem, I have the solution, let's work together, you'd be more likely to succeed. True authority is the ability to take a complex problem and make it simple. If you cannot explain your value proposition in plain language, the prospect assumes one of two things. You don't actually understand your own product. You are hiding a lack of substance behind fancy words. By choosing clarity, you demonstrate a deep foundational mastery of your craft. You signal to the prospect that your solution is so robust that it doesn't need marketing fluff to sustain it. This builds immediate professional rapport and positions you as a consultant rather than a solicitor. I think that's very self explanatory. It's the same as anything. If you want to design, let's just use Tesla for example. Why do people like Teslas? Because they have the auto drive feature, because they're really sustainable and hard to wreck, particularly the cyber trucks. So when you describe this to an audience, you don't have to describe the type of glass that was used to them understanding that this car does not break easily is already enough for them to say, okay, I want that. Or the fact that a Tesla is electric and has self-drive and all these features put in plain simple words are all selling points that make people want to purchase this car. The second you go into the technology and the schematics of it and the whole overlay of how it is coded and how everything comes together, you remove yourself as a peer to your client, making it that much harder for them to relate to you, making it that much harder for them to be confused. And once you've lost them, you've lost them. So, the so what principle, shifting from features to outcomes. The most common mistake in creative sales pitches is the feature dump. Creative teams often spend weeks coming up with catchy names for product features, but they fail to explain why those features matter to the to the bottom line. Clarity requires a ruthless focus on outcomes. A prospect does not buy a drill, they buy a hole in a wall. In the business to business world, they do not buy software, they buy time, mitigate risk, or increase value, or increase revenue. Sorry. The conversion table, creativity versus clarity. The creative approach sounds impressive but requires the buyer to translate the message into a business benefit. The clear approach does the work for them by providing the so what immediately. You remove the burden of proof from the buyer and place the value front and center. I think that was very self explanatory. Then there's no need for them to decode anything or translate anything. The buyer simply knows I am purchasing this and it is to this end that I will be satisfied. I'm purchasing this car for safety. I'm purchasing this car for sustainability. I'm purchasing this car because I don't usually change cars like that over years or change up my contract. So I have to keep this Tesla. As opposed to you trying to sell Tesla itself, you just openly and expressively mention exactly what problem you are trying to solve. Self-drive feature moves allows for less frequent accidents on the road, allows for safety features that you might not have had when you drive manually. So scalability and the sales organization. Beyond the individual interaction, clarity is essential for organizational health. If a sales team relies on creativity to close deals, the result will be inconsistent. Creativity is subjective. Individual is a subjective individual trait that is difficult to replicate. If your top salesperson relies on their unique wit and cleverness to win, you cannot easily teach that to a new hire because creativity cannot be taught. Creativity is something that we are born with in the ways that we are born with it in. So it is difficult to then take that and extrapolate that creativity from a single individual and give it to the rest of your managing team. It's not sustainable in that it cannot be taught. It's not a transferable skill. A clarity-based sales system, however, is highly scalable. A clear value proposition, a structured discovery process, and a straightforward closing script can be documented, taught, and measured. When every member of the team is speaking the same clear language, the data becomes clearer. You can identify exactly where the pitch is failing because the variables are controlled. If the message is clear and prospects still and the prospect still doesn't buy, you have a product market fit problem. If the message is created and the prospect doesn't buy, you don't know the problem. You don't know if the problem is the product, the sales person's delivery, or the prospect's interpretation of the metaphor. Because creativity is in and of itself very fluid. It's not very technical, clinical, and dry cut to the point where you can know that if I do this and this and this, I'll have more or less a good working system. It's more subjective, meaning everyone has their own interpretation to it, making it that much more difficult to replicate and to sustain. And especially for a business which focuses on revenue and consistency, it is very difficult to then use. The three pillars of clarity first sales strategies. To move from a creative heavy approach to professionals, clear standard organizations should adopt these three pillars. The elevator clarity audit. The elevator pitch is a classical concept, but it is often ruined by creativity. A clear pitch should follow a strict formula. We help X target audience do X primary action so that they can X specific results. If a salesperson cannot find in those If a salesperson cannot fill in those blanks without using an adjective like innovative or revolutionary, the message is not clear enough. That's self-explanatory. Removing hidden options. Creativity often leads to offering too many creative solutions or packages. This is known as analysis paralysis. A clear sales provides uh, a clear sales process limits the options to the ones that specifically solve the prospect's problems. Instead of saying, we can do anything you want, a clear professional says, based on what you told me, you need option B, here is why. And this is very good because then you're able to get straight to the point and straight to the pain point and to resolve it. The problem with very vague and creative solutions is that they're not specific enough, and it's very hard to know what you, as the person marketing, is actually opening yourself up to fulfilling as your end of the deal. And it's very difficult to know what the client is actually anticipating or expecting from you because it's all lost in translation. Radical transparency in pricing and process. Creativity is often used to soften the blow of pricing or to obscure a long implementation process. High performing sales professionals use clarity as a tool for qualification. By being clear about the investment and the timeline up front, you weed out tire kickers and build a relationship based on honesty. Yes, a lot can be concealed through creativity, as opposed to just the dry cut method of coming out and saying, I have $1,000 course and this is what you're getting from it, as opposed to some fancy words about how great the course is, how well rounded it is, and losing the subject to how much it is, what you're providing, what value is gained, what problem you're solving. So, in conclusion, the competitive edge of directness. We live in an age of over marketing. Consumers and business to business buyers are more skeptical than ever. They have developed a filter for anything that sounds like a sales pitch or a creative gimmick. When you choose clarity, you are being respectful of your prospect's time. You're treating them like a peer and a professional, as mentioned. By stripping away the unnecessary metaphors and the clever positionings, you allow the true value of your product or service to shine through. In the long run, the clever salesperson might get the first meeting, but the clear salesperson will get the contract. Clarity creates confidence, and confidence is the currency of modern sales. All right, now, guys, I'm going to ask you to quickly pause and focus on the screen. Well, you can always hit me up via DM on Zinzo period international on Instagram. I specialize in email and YouTube copy, particularly YouTube scripts and SEO. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you. I will see you in the next one.